And I will argue with anybody, and I will back it up with facts, that 1984 is the greatest year of music of all time. And we'll get into that in a minute. But favorite album of all time, Prince, Purple Rain, hands down, not even close. Okay, so here we are, episode 2 of podcast yet to be named properly. Maybe it's 2 MCs and a microphone. I don't know. But Todd Everett from the Todd Everett Experience, Derek Rafferty, E3 Detroit. And today we are trying an añejo called Sincoro. And we didn't look this up, but you're thinking this might be Kevin Hart's. We're not sure.
No, I don't think. At first, I thought it, but no, his bottle is a little bit different. But I like the presentation of it.
That's too tall to be Kevin Hart's bottle.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
But okay, so we'd like to start off each episode with sampling a nice something. Todd,
what are we
good
toasting
to see you.
to? We gotta.
We're toasting to the fact that we're still relaxing a little bit, but the craziness that is just about to ensue as wedding season kicks in.
Yes.
Here's to a great season.
Absolutely.
And cheers to you, my friend.
Smooth.
I like it.
Love it.
I will say I still like the Don Julio 1942 better.
Agreed.
But that's not bad.
Agreed.
That's not bad. All right. Today we're talking music. On the last episode, we talked about MC styles, how to become a better MC, the state of the industry, the saturation of the market. We talked about a lot of things.
Yeah.
Today it's going to be a little more lighthearted.
Okay.
Today we are just talking about music.
Music.
So, first thing I want you to talk to me about, because I see that pin on your hat right there, and that tells me a lot about who you are.
Esco,
right? Yeah, show these guys. Show these guys right here.
Oh, NAS, Queen's finest.
There it is. Tell me about your musical influences.
Yeah.
And like what genres of music kind of build you into who you are.
Okay. So for me, I think music played a tremendous, or has had a tremendous impact on me as a person just growing up. When I was younger, my mom and sister, they traveled singing for gospel groups. And in my household, we had like a crazy music collection. And
grew up in Metro Detroit?
I grew up in Buffalo, New York.
Buffalo, New York. That's important. So still Midwest.
Yeah.
A little colder than us, a little more snow than us.
Absolutely. But I started collecting vinyl at a very young age because my mom used to make me keep her records. You know what I mean? So I had gospel records, Reverend James Cleveland, Tremaine Hawkins, Mississippi Mass Choir, stuff like that. And my older brother, one of my older brothers, he was really into like the music. He was a Gap Band fanatic.
Yeah.
My dad had the weirdest shit ever musically. I mean, he had country, he had stuff from like Willie Nelson to like Earth, Wind, and Fire. He was all over the place, right? So, for me, my parents got divorced when I was about 6 years old, and my siblings were all quite older than me. So I got in a place where I started writing music, and music was pretty much my way or my outlet to kind of express myself. And that's how I later got into DJing. But so, there's certain music that I really love for certain reasons. And then there's, just the infatuation I've always had with like album covers and cover art. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what are those specific genres of music for you personally that are the most like if you're sitting quiet in your home with with a sip of liquor and some vinyl, a stack of 5 vinyls that you're going to listen to, what are they?
So like I'm a hip hop head, by far. I'm a hip hop head. My favorite era of music is probably the 70s and the 90s era. So to kind of answer your question, if let's just say I was on a deserted island and I could only take 5 albums, right? I would say one of those albums would be Anita Baker Rapture.
Oh, come on.
I just feel like that's the most perfect body of work that I've ever heard. You know, it has all the replay value in the world.
Yep.
Every song, it's just how the sequence of the songs is just perfect. Everything about that album is perfect to me, right? Then we have Nas Illmatic, as you can see the pin on my hat. That was my education as a kid. You know, that album was just, it taught me so much about life, character, growing up, you know, trusting who to trust, you know, watch out for certain things. You know, that was kind of like my educational piece. You know, they say you can go to school and learn math and all of this stuff. You can go to college, but I feel that Nas Illmatic, that album has given me gems that I still utilize today, like in regular life and also in the business world. Another album that is on my, if you were on a deserted island, would be A Tribe Called Quest. Oh, come on. Midnight Marauders.
Can I kick it? Yes, you can.
What's so sweet about, you know, music that makes me such a passionate person about it is when you can name these albums or these bodies of work and you can say what you were doing at that specific time, or you can just describe, you know, what that time frame was like. You know, I remember my mom took me to a flea market on a Saturday, and it's all of these tapes there, and I saw Midnight Marauders. Now, mind you, we have transitioned into the CD age, so I would have preferred to get it on CD, but like, you know, back in the days, if you had a Sony Walkman, that was everything, right?
With the little orange puff,
exactly.
You know, foam headphones.
If you had the digital one with the time and the buttons on the front, that was everything, right? So Midnight Marauders, bought it at a flea market. I played it every day, nonstop. Every day. You know, that album from beginning to end, still to this day, one of my favorite albums of all time. Then I would have to say, you know, one of my favorite rappers. Well, my favorite rapper is Rakim.
Oh, okay. Old school.
So Eric B. and Rakim, you know, any of their first 4 bodies of work is like my favorite. And I think, you know, as a kid, my brother had the Paid in Full, which is their first release. He had the album cover. He lived with my dad when I would, you know, come to Detroit, and back then it was a big thing out in the black community, like your living room, you had your albums displayed like it was, you know, antique furniture or something, right? You had it displayed and you couldn't touch it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So he had Paid in Full, and I see this guy, all the gold rings and all of this money, and it just scared the shit out of me. It's scared because he has such a serious look, right? So my brother was really into the Gap Band and Eric B. and Rakim, and, you know, wanting to be like your older brother, you're like, okay, let me listen to what he listens to. And I just fell in love with it. You know what I mean? And it was so different from everything else that was out at the time. You know, he was more monotone, more serious, and everything else was kind of like, you know, kind of like Run DMC. You know what I mean?
Right.
So where we at? 3? And
no,
then,
that's 4. Yeah,
that's 4.
Anita, Nas, Tribe, and then Rakim.
Oh, okay, Eric B. and Rakim, and then I'm a real big SWV fan, but let me go a different direction.
Are we referring to the Sisters with Voices,
yes,
SWV?
I love them.
I want you to look in that camera right there.
I love them.
This one right here. And tell people that you were about to tell them that SWV could be one of your top 5 albums of all time. That's a big claim. Todd Everett
and Jodeci are my favorite 90s R&B groups, hands down.
Jodeci, I
No
get.
discussion, right? And you just think about, my age at that point. I think when SWV came out, I might have been around 12 or 13, and I'm throwing Mary J. Blige in there. She's my ultimate favorite. I just saw her over the weekend in Chicago.
Nice.
Those three right there are just everything to me. Like Mary J., when she came out, that's what we saw in the neighborhoods. The fitted Yankee hats with the the Doc Martin looking boots and the jerseys and the what they call them, Daisy Dukes at the time.
Yep.
And Mary J. Blige, her first album was the 411, but I'm gonna take it a step further. My Life, that album is everything you need to know about love and pain. Is in that album. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I would say those are my favorite right there. It's a lot more, but that's a good starting point.
That was good, man. And if you have not listened to every one of those artists or albums, go do it right now.
Have to.
Beauty of Spotify, having it all at our fingertips. All right, mine are a little different.
Okay.
Growing up in the 70s, because I'm an old cat. See the gray hairs right there? And I grew up in Las Vegas, son of a musician, a dad who grew up in the barbershop world and the jazz world, but also liked rock and roll. So I got a good exposure to everything. Something you said wholeheartedly is, you tie pieces of music to where you were at in life, right? So
Yes.
I was born here in Metro Detroit, then moved to Vegas and moved around to a couple different places out there, and then moved back to Michigan in the 80s, moved around to a couple different places here. So for me, unlike somebody who grew up in the same home their whole life, like I've got different periods of my life that I tie the music to. So the year we left Vegas and came back to Michigan was 1984.
Okay.
And I will argue with anybody, and I will back it up with facts, that 1984 is the greatest year of music of all time. And we'll get into that in a minute. But favorite album of all time, Prince, Purple Rain, hands down, not even close. Go ahead. That's your camera over there, by the way.
I'm a Michael Jackson fan, so we'll get into that later.
Hey, listen. I still to this day have my first edition original printed vinyl of Thriller. Don't get me wrong. It's sitting at my house right now. My Thriller, I sat in my room, listened to that album from start to finish 1,000 times while I was reading the lyrics on the liner notes. Believe me, I'm not disrespecting Thriller. It is.
I want to come back to what you said about the liner notes.
Okay. You cannot argue that Thriller is one of the greatest albums of all time. No doubt about it. And the only reason I don't list it is because it was like, well, for the diversity of my list, it's got to be one of those two.
Okay.
Purple Rain represents, because that was also 1984. That's 83 I guess it was released, but 84 is when the hits were just one after the other. And I personally like some of the lesser known tracks on Thriller. There's just some gems on that album, and with Quincy producing it and Michael's ability to so that's a side conversation all on itself. But Purple Rain, greatest album of all time in my humble opinion. My second favorite, and it's hard to pick an album, and I don't want to cheat and say the greatest hits, but Earth, Wind & Fire is my favorite band of all time.
Yes.
And my favorite song next to Purple Rain is a song by Earth, Wind & Fire called The Way of the World. And that song, it just talks about love. And those guys, if you haven't heard that, listen to it right now. Stop this, listen to it, then come back. So that kind of defines my, like R&B and funk, from like the 70s and then into that's where my real, that's what I love the most. After that, I kind of changed it up a little bit.
Okay.
My third favorite is going to be Frank Sinatra, Live at the Sands.
I'm not mad at
Live
that.
at the Sands.
I'm not mad at that.
That was my mom's favorite artist of all time is Sinatra. My dad could sing him. You wouldn't know you weren't listening to him.
Yes.
And I learned to sing like him from my dad. But talk about a pop culture icon that just defined an era. the Rat Pack. There's him, and then there's everybody else. And I could listen to Live at the Sands over and over, especially growing up in Vegas. I was in that culture. And then I'm going to change up again.
Okay.
My next favorite, going to college in the 90s, grunge was so huge for me. Pearl Jam's debut album, 10.
Okay.
Every song, a lot of like true grunge fans are going to tell you that Nirvana is going to be, way better, or, Soundgarden or Alice in Chains. But to me, there's something about, if you listen to Pearl Jam's debut album 10 from beginning to end,
okay,
it will speak to you. Black by Pearl Jam is one of my favorite songs of all time. And then sticking with the diversity here, there's a classic rock group from the 70s called Boston.
Yes.
And Boston's debut album is one of those that you can't just listen to one song. You have to just put it in. And for me, it was a cassette that I originally had.
Okay.
Put in the cassette, you hit play on my Walkman, put my little headphones on, and you listen to that album from start to finish, because every one of them is just absolutely amazing.
Wow.
So Purple Rain by Prince, Earth, Wind, and Fire. Again, hard to narrow down which album because there's just so much gold there. Pearl Jam 10. Oh, Sinatra, Live at the Sands, and Boston's debut album.
That's a really good list. And what's awesome about it is like the diversity in it. And, one thing I can appreciate going back to, my older brother, because I think you and him are about the same age. And remember back in the day, like, how you carry if you were into music and like an aspiring DJ or musician, you might have walked around with a bag of Maxwell tapes.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And, one of the things that I used to do is I used to always take the opportunity to dub, that's copy one cassette to the next, or record, music when I got the chance. So my brother, and I'm like 10 years old, he listened to everything. I'm talking about Bob James, Steely Dan.
Yeah.
I'm just a hip hop head and R&B, right? But I see him listening to this stuff and I start dubbing it. Anything he listened to, I would dub. Take Back to New York, and I'm listening to it. So at a very young age, I was able to identify with all of these different genres. And what was cool about it, as a hip hop head, now when I hear, like the Eric B. and Rakims or like the Run DMC Peter Piper, I'm like, that's Bob James. You know what I mean?
The samples, yeah.
So that was another like chamber of me loving music. Is now I'm starting to understand sampling. And I'm starting to understand, like, wow, they're taking this from that. And that became another element that really motivated and inspired me to want to know more.
Yeah.
Then it became like, I just want to figure out who sampled what. So you mentioned, like, liners earlier. That was the awesome part about back then, is, like, taking a cassette or CD, opening it up, reading the lyrics, reading who produced it, who, and in vinyl collecting, you look for, okay, who was the drummer on that? Who was the writer on that? Okay, that's Rob Temper. Okay, he did this too. Let me check it out. I don't know what it is, but if he's on it, it's something good. And I think that was something to really, really appreciate.
Yeah.
And
you don't get that anymore.
You don't get that anymore. You know what I mean?
100%, man.
It's I'm getting goosebumps talking about this because it just takes me back to those days to where the discovery process was everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And also you valued it more, because when you got to go down to a Tower Records or wherever and spend, 14 of your hard-earned dollars as a teenager to buy an album, you were going to listen to that album from start to finish over and over and over again. And I also argue, whether you like Drake or not, no hate at all. That's your personal preference. But a lot of my friends who like Drake and argue he's the greatest rapper of all time, no. But those who say that well, look at the streams. I argue that if you put Drake in a time period where you had to go spend your money to buy a full album and listen to it, he would not be the artist that he is right now, where you have an app that most likely, if you're younger, your parents paying for it. If you're paying for it, you're paying $10 a month to listen to anything you want unlimited. You're going to listen to things that you wouldn't have paid your money to buy. That's my argument.
So true.
That's my debate.
A lot of people don't realize this. I was talking to my son, 10 years old. He's a DJ, and a lot of times, when I'm in the car, I'm listening to. I'm an old head. I listen to like Earth, Wind and Fire, Isley Brothers, stuff like that in the car, and I'm looking at him, and he's not giving me any type of indication that he likes it, right? And then he's like, Dad, can you put on little whoever, young whoever? But then when we get home and he's practicing, he's listening to that stuff that I'm in the car. So I'm like, okay, he does like it. But the thing is, like, music back then, you had to realize that we didn't have a skip button. You had to listen to every song, right? And going to where you say about Drake is like, you couldn't pick and choose. The songs were longer. They had to give you 3 verses, right?
Yep.
3 long verses, not half verse with, the structure of it. You couldn't publicly say you had a ghostwriter.
Right.
You know what I mean? Your pen game had to be respected. So for me, I'm not really a Drake fan. I was in love with his first couple of bodies of work, and then it all kind of started sounding like a repeat of the same album.
Agreed.
But I definitely agree with you. Like, it was a different game when you had to listen to the entire body of work, and you could say, going back to like the Jodeci and the SWV, if you think of their debut albums, it was like 75% of it was single worthy. It can be a hit single. Back then, they brought out bodies of work like every 24 months. It's like 2 and 3 year gaps because their albums were so good.
And they had to go live to get experience to be able to make a new album.
They had such a long run. Like, this album could be a year and a half old and it still has a hit single off of it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That was the beauty of it. Now it's like artists don't have to make a good full body of work because you can pick and choose through streaming which songs you like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the hottest song might be 2 minutes and 30 seconds long, whereas back then, like if you think of an Earth, Wind and Fire song, you
5, 6, 7 minutes long. Sun
on,
Goddess, come on.
Go to the bathroom, go to the bar, get another drink, come back, and it's still only halfway through the song. You know what I mean?
Yep, 100%, man. And by the way, I never asked you. I think I know the answer though. Nas is your favorite rapper of all time?
No, Rakim.
Oh, Rakim is better.
Rakim,
okay.
AZ, Nas, Biggie, and Scarface.
Okay.
I'm gonna throw Ice Cube in there too.
Fantastic. I'm okay. Ice Cube, the way there's a way he writes lyrics. If you listen to the things he says, you talked about God-given talent in one of our previous episodes.
Yes.
To me, the ability he has to write lyrics, to say a message in a way that most of us would never have been capable of coming up with to say that message. There's a popular trope in rap music where you make it like analogies. You said you're an analogy guy. I'm so great, I'm like, and then you'll put some example in. I go hard like, and he put an example. He makes these analogies that I'll listen to him say it. And I'm like, man, like how do you even think of things like that? And I never would have. So I love Ice Cube and his ability to write lyrics, and he's got a God-given sound when he raps, that a lot of people don't. But my favorite, LL Cool J is my favorite rapper of all time. It started with Walking with a Panther.
LL isn't one of my favorites, but I don't feel like he gets enough flowers, right, for what he's done.
He's one of the OGs of he laid the groundwork for a lot of people that came after him.
When you talk about a Drake, that is LL. LL was I believe, might have been the first rapper you identify with as a sex symbol. He gave you versatility. You have songs like "I'm Bad." Right?
Yeah, I was just gonna say like that
you
song.
You consider it's a club song. It's aggressive, and then on the flip side, you have "I Need Love."
See, now you're taking all my thunder here. The very first rap love song of all time. Come on.
And then you can take it further and say, okay, we've seen him do it by himself. What can he do with a feature? Hey Lover with Boys to Men, right? It's so many more. He has another song called "You and Me" with Kelly Price that I really love. You know, I think it was on the GOAT album. "Around the Way Girl." I mean, these records,
my recent lip sync challenge. I don't know if you saw it. I did "Around the Way Girl," which you're going to be challenged soon.
Perfect song. I mean, and still to this day is one of my favorite hip hop songs of all time, because this is what you saw in the neighborhood. Like when they say, well, what type of female do you want? You're like, listen to "Around the Way Girl."
Yeah.
I want a girl with extensions in the hair.
Bamboo earrings, at least 2 pair. Fendi bag, and a bad attitude.
You know what
That's
I
all
mean?
I need to get me in a good mood.
Exactly. And I think that's what's so great about hip hop is when you can say, I can take this song from 30 and 40 years ago and it's still relevant to this day.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Okay. I'm so glad you said that. By the way, I'm that type of guy. I mean, like, there's just so many LL songs that are just, 6 Minutes of Pleasure, the Jingling Baby. Like, I was an LL fan then.
Okay.
This like host of the lip sync show and on TV shows. Like, he's become very commercial and great for him. He's built a great career.
Yes.
But that's not why I'm a fan of LL. I'm a fan of LL because what he did in the 80s. And that was, all of that. Anyway.
Let's not jump from LL so quick, right?
Okay.
This is something that a lot of people ignore, is when they talk about the greatest, you have to talk about the impact that they had on the industry, on the culture in general, right? Branding. You know what I mean? I think branding got popular years later, that term, right? But if you look at LL, that was branding. You look at some of today's artists, you see Neo, he always has a hat on.
Right.
That came from LL,
yep.
right? The Kango hats, the leather troop gooses.
Run DMC with the Adidas,
right.
The jumpsuit.
So important, back then, if in my neighborhood, if you had a Troop Cobra jacket with some Troop sneakers, you were everything. You know what I mean? Like, it was so important. And I think a lot of times, that gets overlooked when they bring up greatest MCs. You have to think about, how did they influence the culture? These guys were trendsetters. You know what I mean?
Yep.
To this day,
I think that's what makes hip hop what it is. I don't think there's ever been a genre of music. I mean, yeah, you could go back and say the Beatles and Elvis in their fashion style, the Beatles haircut. I mean, you could for sure. But I've heard, and I don't want to say for 1 second that I'm a connoisseur of hip hop anywhere near to the degree you are. But hip hop is so much more. It's a culture, not just music, right?
Yeah.
It is fashion. It is the way you talk, the way you live. It is everything.
Yes.
And those guys are the ones that set that for everybody that came after.
Yes. It's a way of life. It's the most influential genre of music.
For sure.
If you think about everything to this day is sold through hip hop.
Yeah.
Whether it's fashion, the music, it's a powerful genre and it's evolved so much. And sometimes, I personally don't vibe to a lot of the newer stuff. A lot of times it's because I can't really understand what they're saying. But if you think how far it's come, Biggie said in Juicy, you never thought the hip hop would take it this far. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And look how that song came out. I don't even remember. Was that like
Early 90s?
3?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And here we are, 2025, and that comment is still valid.
Yeah.
To this day.
So this is the point I was going to make a few minutes ago. I'm not a big fan holistically of music today.
Okay.
I think innovation has died off. I think originality has largely died off. That is not to say there are not still people out there. Go listen to a Teddy Swims and music is still alive, right? Like when I listen to her, like there's still talent, that's out there. But if you were to go from the year 2000 to now, 2025, Crazy in Love by Beyonce came out in 2001. If that song came out today, exactly as it is, it would, yeah, I could see it. I could see that coming out now. 25 years.
Right.
How much has music changed? But now you go from let's say, I told you how I think 1984 was the greatest year of music of all time, right? And if you don't know, now you know. If you don't know, look up all the music from 1984. You had every genre of music. Hip hop was coming up with Eric B. and Rakim and your LLs and your Run DMCs and your Houdinis and all those guys. So hip hop was huge. Retro music, your Duran Duran, your Aha, your Depeche Mode, The Cure, all like that music was huge. Then you got your pop rock, your Men Without Hats, your Huey Lewis, your Bryan Adams. You got all these guys. Then you got your hard rock. You got your Van Halens. You got your Motley Crues. You got all of that. Then I haven't even hit on Thriller.
Yeah.
And Purple Rain.
Yeah.
Oh, and let's toss a little Tina Turner in there with her biggest hit. What's Love Got to Do with It? Yep. And I could keep going
Pointer
and
Sisters,
going. Automatic and Jump and by the Pointer. We could sit here for an hour and just keep going. And that year, every piece of music, and then they all came together and you got We Are the World. Everything happened in 1984 that just you could define every genre of music in that 1 year.
Yes.
But so take all that music, and like I just mentioned, 2000 to 2025, right? How much has it changed? Go from 84, go back 25 years. That's 1959.
Yes.
Look at the difference from 1959 to 1984, and that same period of time from 2000 to 2025. How much has music changed?
Yes.
That's kind of my argument why I think innovation is dying out. We need some people to come in and, like when you listen to popular music, it should be, that's why I mentioned Teddy Swims a few minutes ago. Mm-hmm. If you're familiar with him, like he's bringing some rock and some soul and some funk and making it cool to play that on a popular station now. It shouldn't just be that when the stations are so segmented, every station only plays one genre of music. But I know you said you grew up in Buffalo, so I don't know if you remember stations like 96.3 back in the day, or what 95.5 used to be back then. When you would listen to the pop music stations, you would hear all of those genres of music.
Okay.
Because all of it was pop music. All of it was stuff that you could listen to. You listen to Run DMC, and actually a good example, Run DMC and Aerosmith with Walk This Way, when they bridged that. Yes. The fact that you can bring those styles together, I feel like we've lost that originality, that innovation, that discovery. People just don't want a younger generation right now doesn't want the versatility, the mix in the music that they love and listen to the way they did like when I was young. And I know that maybe makes me sound old.
I want to play devil's advocate with that.
Okay.
Right? Talking to my best friend, and our friendship was probably built off of just discussions of hip hop, right, and our love for music. And one day we were talking, and I think he asked me about J. Cole.
Okay.
Right? And I said, man, I love J. Cole, right? But here's what I said to him. When you think about the eras you just mentioned, and when you had so much versatility, and you had Public Enemy, NWA, and these are groups, they're not trying to sound like each other. You had Public Enemy, then you had a De La Soul and an NWA. You know what I mean? And they were so good doing what it is that they do in their own lane. I said I love J. Cole, but I already had Nas. And still to this day, like, I can replay Illmatic and it's still teaching me stuff. And I'm like, oh, I'm older now. That line makes sense. These artists were so good, and what they were saying is so relevant to today. I don't think I have room to be a fan of some of these new artists because it's like I was already like, who do we have greater than a Nas? Like, still to this day, he's putting out great classic material, right? And you're still learning from like albums that he dropped 20 years ago, right? And it's like some of those artists were so good. It's kind of like you hear the new artists and you're like, you know what I mean? Like, who's gonna sound like a Ron Isley, right? You have like, what's this guy's name? October London.
Oh, I don't know.
I love him, but we already had Marvin Gaye. You know what I mean? Like, he sounds similar to Marvin Gaye. We already had Marvin. Like, you know what I mean?
Yes, but I don't think you're being devil's advocate. I think we're saying the same thing. It's just not
so.
Because, but to that point, you know, if by that logic, Marvin Gaye, well, then there would have been no room for a Luther. You know what I mean? Like there was Stevie and Marvin, right? Then there was your Luther. Then there was your Brian McKnight. Like those guys kind of play the same
you had
lane,
Luther,
you know.
and then you had Ruben Studdard come out, right?
Sure.
Sounded like Luther, but it's like, we already had Luther. Like, you can sing, it sounds good, but we already had Luther. Like, you know what I mean?
But where is somebody to come and be new and original? And like, I just don't know that it's not like that now.
I just think we're in a watch and repeat
yes.
time. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to identify with who you are when it's so much to see, and when you watch stuff so much, you kind of lose yourself in it. You know, we see that in the DJ game. You know, a lot of times some of my DJs will say, "Oh, you seen this?" And I say, "No, I don't really watch other DJs on YouTube." Like, you know, I watch my all-time favorites who are not like directly in my industry, but I don't really watch too many people that's connected to what I do. You know what I mean? Just because I don't want to lose like what's special about me, or I kind of want to keep growing on me. I don't want to like, because we get so caught up and we get so excited. We're like, oh, they did that. That was good. Now I'm going to go do it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And then you abandon what's special about you sometimes by doing that. So, you know, the thing about music is that I'll use Mary J. Blige for an example. You know, she was never my favorite singer. It was just that what she was singing about was so relatable, and you can feel her pain. Like, she made you believe it was real. She was really going through this. Like, it was authentic, right? And a lot of times when you hear songs, it's just like, you know, sometimes you had a younger artist and you like, you don't know what being in love is yet. Like, you know, you didn't
That's
go
when
through
you pull
this.
out LL. I mean,
You know,
I need love.
You know what I mean? It's like, nah, it's not believable. But I think that was the beauty in music back then. You had artists doing them. You know what I mean? They knew how to pay respect and reverence without necessarily deep diving into it. You know, you might hear a remake of, you know, I think SWV did a remake of a Patti LaBelle song, but you knew, like, even though they recorded it, they knew that they were nowhere near like what Patti LaBelle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And like now, the younger generation, they have a different mindset when it comes to that. You know what I mean? They're
Yep.
like, clear out the way. We're it. You know what I mean? Forget what they were doing. You know what I'm saying?
I wonder if that's why you hear less sampling now than you did, 10, 15, 20 years ago, because they're not thinking back about.
Well,
You think it's the royalties?
it's the same. It's that, and then it's the same thing where things kind of shifted from like you actually are reaching out to musicians to play the drums on this track, but now you have these kits that it's already there for you. You could just
Right.
take it.
The barrier to entry is not what it was. You can. There's 10,000 loops that come with a $70 piece of software, and you just pick one.
Exactly. You know what I mean? And do they really know the music? Do they really know the history? A lot of times I'll watch interviews with these young artists, and they don't really know much about a lot of the older artists and,
Right.
and their body of work. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So, that's one of the reasons I love vinyl collecting so much. Like, I have so many records. I haven't listened to maybe 60% of them. You know what I mean? And sometimes I'll put one on, like, I was listening to this, was it a Dramatics album? It wasn't the Dramatics. It was, I think it was Roy's Royce, maybe.
All right.
And it was I'm playing this song. I'm like, oh, that's Charlie Wilson. There goes my baby. I never knew this was a sample song. And I'm just like, but what's amazing is like this album, it didn't have any of the popular hits on it. Typically, it's like you put it on a shelf or you say, this is trash. But it's like, no, I'm going to listen to it. And then you find a hidden gem. You know what I mean? And it's like today, music is made for the short attention span.
Right. People release singles.
Yeah. So it's like after 30 seconds of the song, I'm done with it. You know what I mean? So I just think like the beauty of music, I just don't find it in today's music. It just doesn't hit the same.
I agree. I agree.
It doesn't hit the same. And I feel like we have a lot of great artists that we never see past their first hit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's a good point. And also, if anybody makes it this far into this episode is a really great reason. We talked on the last episode about, what separates one DJ from another and your ability to MC. I mean, this talking about music. I mean, the ability to have somebody who's a student of music who can think deeper and think about that song that's gonna make people stop and turn and think, okay, that's where I wanted to go tonight.
Yeah.
Like that's a skill that I think is a lost art. All right, to close this episode off, I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Okay.
I can go first if you want. 2 albums that you have not mentioned yet in all of your conversation today that you would tell somebody in that camera, go listen to these 2 albums and you'll enjoy the music. I've been in the back of my head, I've been thinking about it. And the 2 that I'm gonna throw out there, I'm gonna say, I mean, this is an easy one, but Stevie Wonder, Songs in the Key of Life. And the other one, this is gonna be like way out of left field, In Excess, Kick. In Excess,
Okay, I'm
Kick.
caught up on that.
Song is Need You Tonight. You'll recognize that when you hear it. Never Tear Us Apart. Like there's a Devil Inside. Like there was a ton of hits on it, but it's one of those like start to finish, great album.
Okay.
And of course, Stevie, Songs in the Key of Life. We barely even talked about Stevie today, but those are 2 albums I would say go listen to if you want to hear a great album from beginning to end.
Okay.
How about
Oh,
you?
Man, this is hard. Who is Jill Scott?
Ooh, Jill
first
Scott, great
album,
one.
yeah.
We didn't. Oh man, that just.
Yeah.
We got to end this episode, but man, that just taking me down a whole different road of like, of thoughts. I don't know why this made me think of it, but her, and that's like an amazing talent in a genre that maybe she isn't always thought of first, right? And I often think of the Beastie Boys, License to Ill, that album.
Yes.
When I think about one that at the time, it still sells like crazy, but I don't think it gets mentioned a lot. You know what I mean? So many good artists, man. Jill Scott, that's a great one.
Yes.
Oh, hey, great way to end the episode. Go listen to that too.
Sure.
Hey, man, this was a fun one. Cheers to you. We won't do a second shot today. That stuff is strong. But next episode, we'll hit it up. We'll see what else we want to talk about. Until then, man, good times, good conversation. Cheers.
Cheers.